What's up everyone, and welcome back to another video. If you saw my 5K sub special, the what if about Saiyans being good, you probably had a fair amount of questions at the end. If you haven't watched it yet, you could watch it linked at the top of this video or in the description. Anyways, there were some characters introduced that were either there way too early, weren't canon, or shouldn't be there at all. That said, there are reasonings and backstories for each one. This video is labeled as part 1.5 because rather than continuing the story, these are some necessary supplements that are needed to progress the story, and it does get a little bit headcanon-y, but that's tough to avoid for this what if, and I do want to make an interesting and realistic scenario, but still keep it entertaining. So, let's get into it, since a lot of you asked for it. Let's begin with a relatively simple one to explain, Vegeta Squad. Vegeta, Raditz, and Nappa were part of a squad like normal. The trio would often be off-planet, and not much would change for their stories, except a few things. For one, rather than being off-planet to destroy stuff, they're usually off-planet because of Frieza's orders for them to patrol some planet or help him take over it, even though they don't really want to use lethal force because they're good, after all. Whenever they weren't being ordered around by Frieza, they worked for the Saiyans as expected. The Saiyans, being much more kind-hearted in this timeline, they'd be doing very different tasks here, kinda like what Universe 6's Saiyans do. If there was a planet in trouble from a non-Frieza threat that was completely out of Frieza's jurisdiction, or something that he didn't know about, nothing really stopped the Saiyans from helping out. They do love fighting, and when Vegeta's squad did something like this, their morale was higher because they were out doing what they liked and weren't being forced indirectly or directly to take over planets. They were actually helping people, making the universe a better place. All under Frieza's nose, obviously. In this free time, they would occasionally do recon on the Frieza force as well, given that they have access to it, and a rebellion was brewing, and for that rebellion to go anywhere, they needed some info. Of course, as we know, it was put to an abrupt end when Frieza blew up planet Vegeta. The trio was still as strong as they were in the original, but we're going to make another change to this group. Although the trio exists, we're going to add two members for this story that need to have a proper backstory, Shallot and Giblet. That's right, the twin Saiyans that are from Dragon Ball Legends, they're actually part of Vegeta Squadron in this timeline. Now as for them, being from video games and not even from that period of time, we're going to have to completely change their backstory. The two Saiyans are about the same age as Raditz, and lived on planet Vegeta like normal and were brought up as part of the Saiyans military, like most Saiyans were. Being the same age, with similar power and experience, the two were usually assigned to do tasks together, and because of the potential that was obviously seen within them, they ended up being assigned to be with Vegeta and Nappa alongside Raditz, since they showed a lot of promise to be good warriors. Not only are these two comrades with Vegeta, Nappa, and Raditz, but they're very close to each other as well. They've gone through everything together, and rather than them being enemies or whatever like in Dragon Ball Legends, or Giblet being a bad guy, they're pretty friendly as brothers and they get along well. Speaking of Raditz, we're going to address someone else here, Turles. This one will be a little weird to fit in, but not as weird as Shallot and Giblet were. I'm going to be taking into account not only what I just mentioned as a new interpretation of canon, but I'm going to reference a somewhat interesting piece of non-canon material known as Dragonball Zero. This is a fan manga made by someone you may know named Toyotaro, who is well known for making the Dragon Ball AF manga, which is obviously just a fan manga, but another thing that he's well known for is being the one who makes the official manga for Dragon Ball Super. The reason I'm even bringing him up is because while fan mangas aren't canon, it's just a nice little supplementary manga that he made, and it allows us to fit Turles in nicely and give Raditz some more importance. So, that being said, what actually is Dragon Ball Zero? Well, it's a backstory about Raditz, the original one, and it has a big plot point that I'm adapting from this manga, which is the fact that Turles is present in it, and it's kind of a childhood comrade for Raditz. And since this what if is about Saiyans being good, it only makes sense that Raditz would actually have friends like Turles, instead of just having some nameless comrades that he'd work with from time to time when fighting, and people that he wouldn't actually be friendly with. So here, we're going to give Turles a similar relation to our new protagonist. While not part of a Vegeta squad, he was pretty close to Raditz as they occasionally would be sent on missions together, with Turles even being assigned with Vegeta Squad sometimes. So, here we're going to basically make Turles a best friend for Raditz. The way he survives is similar to who we've discussed so far. He was off-planet at the time of planet Vegeta's destruction, while he was still a child, pretty much like Vegeta and Raditz. He wasn't with the other Saiyans at the time, rather he was with a few Frieza Force soldiers on an unnamed planet, doing a pretty light work mission. Hearing about the destruction of his planet made him realize that the rumors about Frieza wanting to dispose of the Saiyans were true, and Raditz was alone with others who probably wanted to do the same. These soldiers were given orders to destroy any Saiyans they know, but given that there were so few there, and they were kind of weak and underestimated Turles, the young Saiyan barely survives out of a combination of dumb luck and brute force. Having connections with Raditz, he was able to get into contact with Raditz and his group without the use of Frieza Force equipment, since that could just spy on him, and he regrouped with Raditz, who was with Vegeta, Nappa, Shallot, and Giblet at the time. As for Gine, in my last video, I mentioned how every Saiyan who could fight went up into the atmosphere to oppose Frieza, which included Bardock. Bardock knew what was happening and he had prepared for it. Bardock himself was prepared to die at any cost just so he could oppose Frieza, and he knew Gine wasn't as strong and he didn't want her to die in vain. After Kakarot was sent to Earth, Bardock had another space pod stolen for Gine in case anything were to happen. His plan was to have the rest of his family survive if he couldn't. Knowing that Raditz was with a group of strong Saiyans and on a remote planet, Bardock thought it would be best if she went with Raditz first, so the other Saiyans could help her train somehow and let her have some sort of protection. And yes, she could have gone to get Kakarot and bring her back to Raditz, but Bardock only wanted her to escape under the condition that the battle was actually going on. Since all these Saiyans were in space at once with power levels everywhere, all of these conflicting power levels would be able to mask her escape and she would be able to covertly fly off into one planet. But if she were to go to Kakarot, she would need to make 2 trips, one to Earth and then one back to Raditz. And if she went to Earth then departed with Kakarot, she wouldn't have the other power levels masking her and she would be caught while flying through space. This is pretty much the reason that Dragon Ball Super Broly gave us for why they didn't go together in the first place, so I'm gonna say that's why Gine won't go there first. But she's able to go to Raditz since she's able to sneak off, and then eventually joins Raditz and his group during this last stand of the Saiyans. With this group all together, that accounts for 7 of the 10 Saiyans I showed off in the last video. We're still missing 3, Tarble, Broly, and Paradis. Tarble is a pretty easy one to fit in. Similar to the reason he's alive when he was introduced, he was also off-planet when it was destroyed. Given that most of the people with him now survived by being off-planet, Vegeta realizes that the same thing might have happened with Tarble and he may still be alive. Vegeta and the group are able to locate Tarble after the dust settles and send their location to him covertly, with Tarble joining the remaining Saiyans without hesitation. He's a kid after all, and he wouldn't want to be alone, and he'd immediately accept going with his brother. There's no reason he wouldn't want to join the group since his brother is there and they're also Saiyans as well and he could trust them, so he would want to go with them. The group of Saiyans spend the remaining years working with the Frieza Force in order to kinda gain their trust and not be destroyed, and they gain a lot of intelligence on the group by doing this. During this time, they also try to search for any other Saiyan survivors on whatever planets they encounter. One day, they stumble upon a barren planet with a decently high power level on it, but not much more, and they decide to check it out. Nappa then realizes the significance of this planet. They land on the planet and find no intelligent life except 2 Saiyans, an adult named Paradis and his son Broly. One key difference, however, is this planet is not Vampa, and there's a reason for that. So let's get into the backstory for these 2. Given that the Saiyans are nicer people, when King Vegeta finds out about Broly, he isn't jealous about his power, and while he is nervous about his power like normal, he instead sees promise and a potential savior for the Saiyan race. He calls Paradis up to his throne and fills him in on his idea. Seeing that Frieza may destroy their planet soon, and Broly has a high power, King Vegeta doesn't want Frieza to find Broly on this planet and kill him or all the Saiyans out of fear. He's obviously a little nervous about Broly's explosive power, and he tells Paradis about this. He tells Paradis that he wants to send the 2 of them off planet to somewhere that's remote but completely habitable, where the environment isn't harsh and deadly like Vampa. This not only keeps Broly off Frieza's radar and gives him a chance to live if Frieza destroys the planet, but it gives an opportunity for Paradis to get Broly under control without Broly potentially going berserk and destroying the planet. Paradis reluctantly agrees, and he isn't that mad at the king because he realizes the king has no malicious intent, and he also knows that this is pretty much necessary and it's all because of Frieza. Besides, if anything were to happen to planet Vegeta, they would then survive and be found by whatever Saiyans remain, so it wouldn't be that bad of a deal for them since they basically have guaranteed survival now. Now remember how I mentioned that Nappa recognized this planet? Well, King Vegeta actually mentioned this planet and the objective of finding Paradis and Broly to Nappa, since Vegeta is a child at the time and probably wouldn't remember it. Nappa, not really being the brightest guy, also did forget, but his memory is jogged when they actually arrive there, and he knows who the 2 Saiyans are. Paradis is informed on what happened, and even though it's a few years later, he knows that he must join these Saiyans to avenge the Saiyan race and take down Frieza. Now we have our full team of Saiyans. In the years preceding this, they continue to gain the trust of the Frieza Force to avoid destruction, and Frieza doesn't fear them since it's a small group rather than the entire planet of potential threats. Now, on Frieza's good side, and having trained to be strong enough, time passes and Raditz eventually knows that he should go to Earth covertly and recruit Kakarot to the team. You see, when they actually encountered people like Paradis, Broly, Tarble, and Turles, they were only able to get away with this because they were able to stop to these planets on the side during whatever quest they had. So it didn't really catch the attention of Frieza. But there was never any mission that took place near our solar system or Earth, so there was no reason for them to actually stop near Earth and get Kakarot, because that brief stop to planet Earth would actually raise a couple eyebrows and get the attention of Frieza. But now, they actually have a lot of Frieza's trust, since they're kind of his underlings, kind of like how Vegeta, Raditz, and Nappa were in the original, so Raditz is able to freely go off to Earth without Frieza knowing what he's actually doing. This obviously leads to part 1 of the series and ends up where we left off in the last part. As a little side note, the human Z-Fighters on Earth keep training because of the threat of Frieza, and Bulma actually has built them a gravity chamber as well like she did for Goku, which they try to get accustomed to, so they still end up training and get strong, even more so than the original. They are Earth's only line of defense at the moment after all. They have no immediate threat now since Piccolo's gone and he's not even that evil anymore, and Frieza doesn't have his sights set on Earth yet. Also, when Goku, Gohan, and Piccolo arrive to see the other Saiyans, it's age 762, around the same time Vegeta and Nappa came to Earth in the original timeline. This year that Goku's been absent has given everyone a greater motivation to train, and to do so more rigorously, and with the gravity chamber now, they're a lot more powerful than their Saiyan Saga counterparts. Instead of just being a little bit stronger than Raditz, their power levels are around 5 times greater than they are in canon. Yamcha's at 8,000, Krillin's at 8,200, and Tien is at 8,400. Yajirobe and Chaozu have been training as well, although they have weaker powers, at 3,800 and 3,700 respectively. Just as a recap, we have a lot of characters here, which will make this more challenging for me, but also have a lot of opportunities to make the story a lot more interesting. Here's everyone involved so far. Of course, we have the 3 from Earth, Goku, Gohan, and Piccolo. From the Saiyans, we have Vegeta, Tarble, Raditz, Nappa, Gine, Shallot, Giblet, Turles, Broly, and Paradis. That's a lot to remember. Sorry if there's any plot holes or anything like that, but these explanations I feel are realistic and still allow the characters to fit in the story somehow. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on part 2 of this series. Be sure to like and subscribe if you already haven't, and be sure to hit the bell icon to be notified of any future videos, especially the second part of this series, since you're going to want to see that. It gets pretty interesting from here on out. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.